I'm going to switch over and I'm going to give you some tips about Core IDE. It's worth pointing out that Android Studio is powered by the Intellij platform, so a lot of the tips I'll be showing you today work across many of the Jetbrains products. First, we're going to look into how to become a master of the environment, how to move around tool windows, editor windows, and find whatever you need. So I'll switch over to Android Studio now. At the heart of Android Studio is tool windows and editor tabs. You can open and close tool windows by clicking on the little buttons that are around the edges. But, of course, it's much easier to use the keyboard. If you look carefully, the ones down the bottom, you'll see this underlined number 9. If I press Alt 9, it opens that window. And Alt 1 will open project window for me. Press Alt 1 again to toggle it closed. So that's really handy. But if that was easy for you and you're already doing that, how about we wake you up with a super pro tip? What if you want to get to this Gradle window for which there's no shortcut? I can use the switcher, Control Tab, switches between most recent files. But if you hold the Control key and don't let go, you can now navigate with the arrow keys. Notice that every item on the left here has an underlined letter and the Gradle window has a G. So I can just press G to open the Gradle window. Now, of course, you want to be able to close windows. Shift Escape closes the window you're in. But it's also super useful if you're inside your editor and you don't want to have to leave your focus to get that extra space. So without leaving the editor, just press Shift Escape and it closes the most recently opened window. It's great, you can easily get back to it with F12 anytime, and Escape puts you back in the document well. But now, a trick that I use all the time is to hide all windows. Just give me every space that I've got. Control Shift F12 hides all the windows. And it's neat because you can press it again to bring them all back. All right, let's see what else I've got to show you today. All right, while I've got some windows here, it's worth noting that whenever you're in a tree view and a tool window and many different places, you can just start typing and immediately results get filtered and you can navigate with the arrow keys. Particularly handy in the find results. If you need to filter through thousands of results, it'll instantly take you to what you need. But we're done with our tool windows for now. Let's take a look at our editor tabs. So these are our editor tabs up top here, and as I mentioned, Control Tab switches between the most recent tabs. But what if you want to move to the one immediately to your right? This tab here, or this one here. For that we use the Alt key. Alt right moves to the right, and Alt left moves to the left. If you happen to be in a layout editor, and you want to switch between the tabs at the bottom here, Alt Shift right and Alt Shift left help toggle through that. This also works if you happen to be in some of the tool windows, like version control. You can use the Alt key to tab between those. All right, so now that we've seen that, if you happen to be on a wide screen, like many developers are, it's sometimes very handy to have more code available. So here I can take a tab and I can say move right. Now I've split it into two different editors, and you can easily drag other editors over to join the other side. Now at this point, I would like to unsplit that row. I'm going to show you the find anything. Double shift opens a box that lets me type anything I want. If I type unsplit, I get an action, I can press enter, and all my windows are back together again. This double shift also lets me find files, classes, symbols, and actions. But pro developers tend to filter directly to files or classes or actions if they know that's what they want. And it's easy enough to remember the shortcuts. They all start with N on a Windows and Linux, versions of Control-N, Control-Shift-N. So you can easily find a file with Control-Shift-N, and it filters directly to files only. All right, so that's just getting in and around our environment. Now let's look at getting in and around code. So one thing worth noting is my favorite setting, which I always turn on every installation, is camel hump navigation. I'll show you the beauty of it. When we use the Control key, we can skip words with the left and right key. And when we use the Shift key, we can select text, put them together, and we can select entire words. But what do we do if we want to change this part in the middle here? It can be very painful to get there with many keystrokes, and I don't want to have to pick up my mouse. So now, opening up my Find Anything, I search for camel hump, and there's a setting here, use camel hump words. And I can turn the setting on right here just by pressing enter. Now, with one keystroke, I can go straight to the next capital letter. And with another, I can select that middle part, easily replace it with a new name. Neat, huh? All right, now to get to the method below, press Alt down. You repeatedly press Alt down to go to the method below and press Alt up to go to the method above. This is especially useful if you're at the bottom of a method and you're trying to get to the top. just press Alt up and it takes you straight to the method signature. But now, what if you find you're navigating around, you've been moving everywhere, and now you finally want to go back to where you were editing code last? At this point, we use go to last edit location. Control-Shift backspace takes me right there. All right, so let's look about some of the language features that make it a lot easier to code in your editor. We'll start off by talking about the method info and parameter info. I'm trying to fix a bug here. There's something wrong with the image dimensions. So I'm going to see, what does this method do? By pressing Control Q, it opens up a little tooltip with all the Java doc. Now I can read the method signature, what it's returning, and any comments about it. You can even click to drill further to find out more about the objects in it. Now if I happen to be inside the parameter set, I can press Control P on a Windows box. And now I can tab and Shift tab between the parameters. Oh, hang on. I see what's going on here. It's looking for a width, but I've provided height. So now I'm going to use basic code completion. Control space opens up basic code completion, and cleverly it's automatically put card width at the top of the list because it matches part of the parameter name. I like that. Now to take that, there's two different ways of taking these things. You can either press tab or press enter. If I press tab, it will replace the text that's there, which is what I usually want. But in this instance, I want to keep that so I can use it as my next parameter. So I'm going to press enter, and now the text stays, and I can simply add a comma, and I've got another parameter that I can use. But let's look at smart code completion. I suppose most people here are familiar with code completion, but did you know how smart it was? If I need to fill out the parameters here, I don't even want to look at to see what I need. That's too much thinking. If I press Control Space, I get a long list of too many things available to me. But if I use Smart Type Completion, I can press Control Shift Space and just get a filtered list of only those variables that will fit in that type. That means I don't have to think half as hard. And when I press Tab, it automatically completes it with a comma and moves me to the next field. So I make it a reflex. I always use Smart Type Completion, and in this case, it's going to give me the one item I need. Even better still, it's so smart, if I do it from the beginning, if you look down, it's already suggested the two parameters that will complete this lot, and with one tab, it fills them all out for me. How's that? All right, now, the next section is going to be a little bit mad. So hold on to your seats, as I'm going to blind you through a whole lot of editing tips and tricks, including some advanced and some basic ones. I expect you're probably using a lot of these today, but see if you can pick which ones you're not using, and maybe try to work out how they can be helpful to you. Don't worry about trying to learn all these things. If there's anything you need to find, you can always use Find Action, Control-Shift-A. And then you can look for what you need, and you'll find the shortcut that applies on your system. All right, let's get started. So, here's my task. I need to add lookup and query as extra parameters. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy that. Hang on, did I just copy two things? That's going to come in handy later. First, scroll the page with Control down. Down here, I want to join these lines, and Control-Shift-J brings them together. I can repeatedly press it to bring up the bottom line. Now at this point, expand selection increases the selection through scope. It nicely stops at blank lines and then goes through to parameters. You can bring it back with Control-Shift-W so you get just what you need. Duplicate code. I can take this block and make a copy, many copies, and it doesn't muck with my copy-paste buffer. Comment that code with Control/ and comment it again with Control/. The neat thing is, if you're on a single line, you can press it and it moves down one. That's especially useful if you want to turn one lot off and turn one lot on. All right, let's look at moving lines. Take these two lines. You don't even need to select the whole line. You can move them up or down using Control-Shift up and down. At this point, if I'm going to move it into a block, it automatically formats it for me. But notice it won't go any higher than the scope. For that, there's a special shortcut. Alt-Shift up will push those lines wherever you need them to be. But I don't even want those lines, so I'm going to use Control-Y to delete them. Now, I want to get to this section here where it says search, but I don't want to use my mouse, so I'll use Control-F and just start typing. That's easy enough. Now, to grab this item and the one below it, I'll use multi-caret. I'll grab one, I'll grab another, hell, I'll grab several. Actually, I went too far. I'll use the Shift key to grab back a little bit. Now, I can paste the item I copied earlier. Keeping my two carets, I'll push them down again, use Expand Selection to select both, and now Control-Shift-V lets me copy and paste from my previous items. How's that? Now, Let's see what else we can do. We'll have a look at extracting variables, methods, and parameters. I see a lot of this code is duplicated. So why don't I take this and make a method out of it, or a function in Kotlin? Control-Alt-Shift-T offers me an entire refactoring menu where I can do all sorts of things. It's worth noting that the shortcuts for extract variable, extract parameter, and extract method all start with the same Control-Alt and end with V for variable, P for parameter, M for method. I'm going to take this one now, give it a method name, and note that it creates the method for me and automatically calls it in that place. Sure, that's great, but what about all these other things? I want to do those to be in the method too. So I'm going to undo that. Now here's a pro tip. If you're going to be extracting methods and there's part of it that's similar, but just different a little bit, extract that into a variable. Control-Alt-V. I'll take both of these. I'll call it prefix. Now, if I try to extract this part with Control-Alt-M, I'll call it build path, the tool detects that there are already two other sections that are very similar and will replace them if I want. Yes, I'll take that, and yes, I'll take that. Thank you. And now I can easily put this back, and I'm back to where I was. That was using the inline variable. So now I'm going to show you some more things. Before I show you extract parameter, I'm going to show you surrounds with. I want to stop this from having errors. So Control-Alt-T, and now I can now surround with anything I like. In this case, I'm going to type try, and I can surround it with a try-catch. Control-Shift-Enter does complete statement and puts my caret where I need to be. Now I'm going to use a live template, like log-D, which will print out a log statement. Or, like the classic Java system out, I can type sout to get a Kotlin print statement. At this point, I want this to be different in every caller, so I'm going to extract that as a parameter. Note that I'll give it a name, error, text, and now that text is going to be put in every method that was called before. Here you can see the text has appeared above. Oops, wrong caret. Now, to get to the method, Control-B goes to definition, but if you're already at the definition, it'll go to the callers. Now I can change this text and say error 2 and error 3. Now let's look at some intentions. You can just tell the tool what you want and have it do it. Let's say I want this to start returning a Boolean. I'll get a red squiggly and a light bulb because it's not a Boolean function. But when I press Alt-Enter, it'll change the return type to Boolean for me. That's neat. So now I can come up here. If I want to wrap this in an if statement, I can use Control-Alt-T surround with again, which is handy if I want to get an else block as well. But check out postfix completion. If you have a Boolean, you can just type .if. And now, when I press Tab, it wraps that in an if statement. I like that. You can also use postfix completion for an iterator. Let's say I have a list already. If I type .for and press Tab, it gives me a variable that's nicely named as the singular version of my plural and puts me right back where I need. Now this is kind of cool. At this point I realize I could have just always used this one loop to get me around. So I'm going to fix this up with a smart code completion, put my URI prefix in here, and now delete line becomes my friend. Control-Y repeatedly to delete all that. Now, there's more intentions. If I hold my caret on anything and see a light bulb, I can see what it offers me. And there's all sorts of things like invert if condition, which nicely flips and indents everything for me. And there's another one over here. It's offering me to replace and negate it and negate the is empty. And flips that around. Of course, there's dozens of intentions. And I encourage you to go into the search and look for them yourself. We have provided lots of intentions specifically built for Kotlin. So you'll see all of those in here, including the ones that I just demonstrated now, and many other great ones like merging if statements. So that's the end of my flyby demo. And so with that, I'd like to hand over to Diego.